In this video, I interview a female event planner which used to work in big events company in London, and some of her assignments were organizing events in countries like Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Egypt. So in this interview, we'll be talking about how does it feel organizing events in Arabic countries while being a female event planner from different country. So she will share her experiences, and my guest wanted to be anonymous, so you will not see her face. Anyway, enjoy this conversation and don't forget to subscribe below to the Clex YouTube channel if you want to hear more interviews with event organizers and learn more about virtual summit technologies which you can use to run your online events. Hello, could you introduce yourself and tell us your story? How did you get into the events industry?
Hi. After I graduated from school, I moved to London where I finished event management studies. And then I was working with events with one of the leading event organizers for over 6 years. And then after 9 years of living in London, I moved back home and I work as a freelance event manager.
Cool. So what kind of events did you do at the London's company?
So I mainly did conferences. I also worked with organizing award dinners and cocktail parties. So anything really ranging from 50 to 2,000 people. And it was international conferences for professionals in financial institutions. So we worked a lot with governments, ministries, and banks and
All
all
right.
those kind
So,
of clients.
of course, today we will be talking about international events. So, what kind of events did you do outside UK?
So funny fact is that I only did one or two events in London. The rest of the events that I planned were outside of the UK. I worked a lot in Europe, so Paris, Berlin, Milan, Amsterdam, Brussels. But then I also worked in the US, in Miami, New York. I did a few events in Asia, and then I did quite a lot of events in the Middle East. So I worked in Lebanon, Jordan, Bahrain, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and a few more.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this will be the topic today, the Arabic Peninsula, the events in that region. But actually, before we move on, can you tell why did you decide to get out of this big company organizing such interesting events and you are now just a freelancer?
Just the freelancer. Thank you very much. No, so I've decided to move out of London. It had nothing to do with Brexit, but it was nice timing. And I decided to move back to my home country. And I think it was just kind of living in London for over 9 years. The pace of life is very different. The job working in events is very stressful. And then because you're always living, you're always planning in the future. You never have this, you don't really enjoy the moment now. And I realized that I never planned to stay in London for that long. I planned to go there, finish the university, maybe work for a few years to get some experience and then move back home.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always planning to move back, but then I got the job with this company and I absolutely loved it. It was such a good experience. And then I think after working there for quite a few years, after I did all the biggest events that they do, and there weren't that many more places I could go to and events that I could try out, I've decided it's time for a change. So I was either going to change the company or the country altogether.
Okay.
So that was the nice timing. And I think it was just kind of the time for me to move on. And it was such an amazing experience. But yeah, I think just the pace of life now, I'm very happy planning my own time and yeah, just kind of having a lot more relaxed lifestyle than I did when I lived in London.
All right, so let's go back to London. And at the time when you worked with events in, you said Lebanon, Saudi Arabia. So How many events actually did you do in Arabic countries? Do you remember?
I would say probably 15, 20, maybe more.
Cool.
It's
Interesting.
really hard to tell. And some, because when I started, I was kind of helping uh, some of these events. I went there to help because my boss was doing them. So I was helping her. And then the next year, she kind of passed it on to me. So that was, it was interesting to kind of go there and just help her out to see it from a different point of view, and then go back there and have like a full responsibility of running the
Mhm.
event all by myself.
All right. So you were organizing events in that region. You were female, and that region is obviously dominated by male, right? Like, how is it
Mm.
the business culture over there? How did you feel? Or I don't know. Yeah, let's talk first about the female and male situation.
I think that in some countries, because a lot of, we worked with the best hotels in the country, and it was always like, the service there were great, and of a lot of females work in the teams looking after like the clients working in events. So there are a lot of women who work there, or even women who work for our sponsors, so like as marketing, and they would work with us to deliver the conference. So I didn't feel it that much in most of these countries because it wasn't really an issue. And I personally haven't had, you know, like discrimination because I'm female, especially in the events industry. Working in Saudi Arabia was definitely interesting because I think that's one country where you can feel it a bit more. And when I went there for the first time, I think it was maybe 2016. That's when it was a bit more like, whoa, okay, this is very different. I was only going there to help my boss. But even then, I remember like like the preparation, even to go to the event, is very different. You have to wear the abaya the whole time. So you have to put it on before getting off the plane, before even the plane lands, and then you have to wear it.
What is abaya? Is it this where you
So
can see only the eyes?
no, so you can see the face. It's
Hmm.
a dress starting from your neck. It's just a
Hmm.
black dress, and they have you also have to carry a scarf with you, where they might ask you to put it on. Um, but again, when I went to Saudi Arabia, you would be picked up from the airport. They would take you straight to the hotel. You wouldn't really leave the hotel. The only time you would leave the hotel would be to go to another hotel for dinner or see something, but you didn't, go do any sightseeing. And the hotels are like 5-star resorts, so you don't, and they're used to international travelers and businesswomen and all that. But I think just the rules are a bit different. So it's interesting to see. And I think you just have to kind of be respectful of their cultural traditions and just go with it. If you're going there already, very um, kind of upset that this is going to be different because you're a woman, then it's not really going to go there. Like, it's not going to go well. So I think you just have to be respectful, and you're visiting their country. These are their rules. You might disagree with the things that they do, but I also don't want to get in trouble. So yeah, but even after that, I went to Saudi again 2 or 3 times afterwards. And every year it was getting a bit easier,
More
as in
relaxed.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was more relaxed. And we had women speakers who would even take off their abayas at the conference, so they would wear like a nice business suit, and it was kind of okay. Then it wasn't as, like, whoa, what is going on? So that changed a lot. It was a challenge for me because being quite young as well, and having a team of men where I have to go there and be like, I need you to get this, I need you to do that. And at first they would be staring at me and they're like, why are you telling me
Yeah.
what to do?
So
So
yeah,
that was, that was
let's
challenging but interesting.
let's talk about this because you had to talk to the local services which were provided by usually men, right?
Yeah, so we had like most of the suppliers are um, men.
So how did you have to overcome something, or they had to overcome something? Like, did you have to repeat 5 times until they understood that you are telling their, I don't know, command or order? Or...
I think it was a bit, I've heard stories from when my colleagues were doing events in Saudi Arabia years ago, that a female colleague would tell them what to do, and then they would go to the male colleague and be like, so what do you want us to do? And he's like, whatever she said. And they're like, okay, now, like, then we'll do it, because they won't take your word for it. But that was quite a few years ago. And I didn't really, because I organize all events remotely. So I work in London. We speak mainly via emails, not even over the phone, because the reception and getting them on the phone and the time difference and all that. So when I get there, I'm only there for maybe 4 or 5 days max. So they might not even understand beforehand that I'm a woman and that's what they're dealing with. And then when you're there, most of these people, I didn't have, I wasn't working in like construction, we had construction workers there to do the exhibition and all that, but most of these people are really well educated. They live outside of the Saudi Arabia. So, like, no one is going to be, the people that they deal with as well on the daily basis, the hotel, they're used to international business people and businesswomen including. So, and same with our clients and most of the workers that I had to deal with, they weren't, I think it's more like some of the staff at the hotel, like the waiters, if you ask them something and they'll get all confused but yeah, that wasn't like a major problem. It was interesting. And it's interesting to see how even over the years that I've been to Saudi, like how that has improved and changed. So I think it's last time I was there was probably 2018. So I imagine it has changed a lot since then as well.
And do they speak English very well?
Yeah, so majority of people that I work with, again, they represent international banks or financial institutions or the government. There are no problems speaking to them. We had delegates who would only speak Arabic, so we would have to provide translation. And we had a few members of staff in our team who spoke Arabic, so they would always kind of be on hand to assist with any questions.
Mm-hmm. So you saw people organizing events in Europe, and then you saw how events or event organization is working in Arabic countries. Can you compare a little bit to, I don't know, to compare the different working style or different, timelines needed? Can you give us some background?
Yeah. So I think that every conference is very different, regardless where you plan it. You can have a conference in New York and it can be very challenging and stressful because of their union laws and their regulations. And then you're planning something in Jordan where you have other kinds of issues. But I think my friend once told me when I was asking her why she chose to work mainly in the Middle East rather than the US or Europe. And she said that in the US or Europe, the kind of the relationship that you have is more about like a transaction. So, the sponsors or the delegates, they're paying you money to get a good service. So you give them a good product and that's it. Everyone's happy.
Like
That's
business relationship.
Yeah, it's like a business transaction. And in the Middle East, she said that that's all about relationships. So she would have to go to, a client's daughter's birthday party or a barbecue, and you have these really close relationships to your clients, your suppliers, and I think that's one of the nice parts of working in the Middle East as well, because it is more challenging in terms of work. I found, like you said, the timelines, you have to be a bit more strict with them. You have to push them a bit more. Sometimes, not always. but yeah, you have these, really nice relationships, and people, the suppliers that I've worked with, I still have really good friends in Lebanon, Egypt, Bahrain. And it's really nice because when you're in that situation with events as well, you try to plan as much as possible, but if something goes wrong on the day, it's usually kind of out of your hands. And having really good relationship with suppliers, that means that someone's there, and they'll have your back, they'll try and get you out of the situation. And so I think that's the really nice part about the Middle East. So I completely agree that it's all about the relationships. In terms of working, I mean, I found that it's the most important part is people. So if you have a great team, you could be doing event in Germany and everyone's really efficient, but if you don't your suppliers don't understand what you need, and you have to keep going and go, it's not going to go well. And then if you have, in Egypt, for example, we had problems. So like I said, there are different kind of problems. They're more like technical. And we had, the electricity disappeared in the middle of the conference, and they had to get a generator, and they did that, and it was fine and it worked fine. But you have to be prepared for these kind of problems. We had where you couldn't hear any sound because of the microphones, because apparently there are different frequencies that you can and cannot use, and you can only have that many mics on. So things like that would be the most stressful. Like the technical side, I guess, on the day would be a little more stressful in the Middle East, because I found that sometimes it can be a bit less reliable. But yeah, I think once you find a good team in-house, and then you have your good suppliers, I've always tried to work with the same companies. Again, you get a lot of people want to work with you, so you get a lot of quotes, and everyone's trying to kind of get that business. But once you find someone they can really work with, and they then understand your events better than anyone else, so they know exactly what you need, and that just makes it so much easier wherever you work.
Technically, they are as advanced as everywhere in the world, I can imagine, right?
Oh, they're even better in some ways. They have, for example, in New York, we would have kind of a basic stage set where you would have either hanging banners or like a small backdrop. And in Saudi Arabia or Qatar or those countries, you would have like a massive LED screen. And LED, they don't even have they don't really use normal projectors anymore. So it's mainly just the LED. So from technical side, they do have a lot, which is funny again, because then they're having problems with the mics. So I don't know. But that, again, depends on the country, depends on the suppliers, it depends on your budgets as well, how much you're willing to spend. If you have a limited budget, I'm sure they can get. But problem is like electricity, hotels, electricity. And, if it's a country, kind of like the problem that is out of everyone's hands. It doesn't really matter. You can only spend money on generators and wish that that's going to be enough.
And you said relationship is very important. So this implies that when it's a good relationship, then you are keeping the word and you should be reliable. But at some point you mentioned that you couldn't, they were not reliable in some cases, or?
Yeah, so we had, we've planned a conference, and it was a new conference, so we didn't have any suppliers, and it's quite difficult getting, because we work remotely, and I can only give them examples of what we've done in the past. I can give them all the specifications and then ask them to kind of match that. But until you actually see their events, until you're actually there, it's really hard to compare. So we would always try and get recommendations from other event managers and people they've worked with in the past. But every event is different. All the requirements are different. And, so you never really know. So we had situations where, like I said, a problem with the microphones, and I asked them to bring 8, I believe, so they could switch over the new speakers, the new panels to go on. So there's no kind of switching over on stage during the conference. They only brought 4. That wasn't enough. And then in the end, half of the mics weren't working. We had some people on stage who then had to use handheld mics that we only used for Q&A, and then those stopped working, and I was just there like, oh my god. But apparently it was quite a common problem in that country, so it wasn't too bad. But then after that, we would get a lot of quotes, people wanting to work with us, and then we would have to compare and see if it's, because you still want to improve your events as well. But we've had companies that we worked with for over 10 years, and like I said, it's amazing because even from our side, we would have an event manager would change every few years or every year if you're doing different events and you can't go there anymore. And then they would have their team working on that event for over 10 years. So they know your event better than you do. And sometimes you come there and they're like, oh, no. Last year we did this and you should do this. And we're like, oh, okay.
Okay. And problem solving was efficient? Like whenever, let's say during the event, something happened and you need to address, local service providers, did you manage to solve on time? And
yeah, I mean, I can't think of any major, problems that I've had on the day. I try to, it's part of my job as well to make sure that everything is kind of
organized,
planned and ready. Yeah. But I'm a perfectionist as well, so that doesn't make it easier, because then I'm thinking about all these different scenarios, what could happen, and all the crazy ones that never really happen. I'm trying to be prepared for everything. But yeah, overall, I think we've never had, I did have one supplier walk out of the conference for a few hours when everything was going really, really bad. And then we were just I was just calling his boss, and then they sorted it out and it was fine. But we did have, you just you can only do as much research as you can before the hand. But even with printed materials, you wait until last minute to send everything to print, so it gets to the venue just before you arrive, because you're still waiting for last minute changes that you can't push back. And then you come there and the logo is we had to rebuild stage sets, like a stage set 80 meters by 5 meters. They had to reprint it overnight and build it up again. And then you can't go to sleep because you're like, okay, but at least they're doing it. Because before, when you're working on your deadlines and you're like, okay, how many days do you need to print it? They're like, oh, at least a week. You're like, no, you'll have 3 days. Is that enough? 3 days is fine. And then you find out that it's actually possible to do it in a couple of hours when there's no other way. So they've always been really, it's problems like this, if the printers, if one of the logos on stage set is kind of blurry or the color isn't right, you just have to make sure that's the first thing you check, and then they can fix it for you. So luckily we haven't had those kind of problems on the day.
So what were your biggest challenges? Like maybe 3 things which you remember strong from all these experiences?
I don't know if I can think of 3 exact things.
1.5.
1.5. Yeah, like I said, I think there are different challenges in different countries, and this is what kind of event management is about. They have to deal with whatever comes your way, and you can't always plan for it. I always try and plan and prepare myself for any kind of situation that could happen on the day. Again, it's not always possible. So I think challenging is, just being respectful, and like the cultural differences, working in the Middle East as well. You just have to be really respectful and know where you're going as well, and know their rules and laws, because you don't want to be disrespectful just because you don't know about it. So that's one thing. And I was lucky, the language barrier wasn't that big of an issue, because I've worked mainly with English speakers, and if I wasn't, there was always someone who could help and translate, so that was always fine. And yeah, in general, I think just the timings, maybe having like really strict time management, because you never have that much time. So you get, on this day you have to send everything out and you're still waiting for one client to send you something and you're all like this waiting, can't get through to them, and just situations like this. So I think a week before the event, 2 weeks, 2 weeks before the event, that's the most stressful week. And then a week before is just fine because it's just preparation. And then if everything goes well on the first day in the morning, then you're fine. Because all kind of the technical difficulties are done and dealt with. And then you can just, if it goes well at the start, then it's likely to end well as well.
So if someone would offer you to work on another event in those countries in Middle East, and let's say another option would be to work in some country in Europe where you haven't been, which would you choose again, to go to Arabic environment?
Yeah, I would probably choose the Middle East just because it's just I just really enjoy the relationship part of it. So if I had to choose forever work in Europe or work in the Middle East, of course working remotely from where I am because I'm not moving anywhere, then I would definitely choose the Middle East. I did have a few job offers to move permanently to Qatar and somewhere else, but I was like, I don't think I could. I'm too organized and I'm too planned, and I think the pace of life would just be everyone's too chill for me in general, not in work environment.
And do you think being a male event manager from, let's say, from London, from Europe, coming to Middle East would be a little bit different experience, or it's not such a big difference?
It's hard to say because I don't know that many male event organizers in London as well. I've only met a few because I think again, not saying that this is a job just for women, but I think you have to, the attention to detail, and you have to be really, really organized. I think that's something that they sometimes find more difficult, I guess. In terms of making life easier, if you go work in the events industry in the Middle East, it probably would make it a little easier because just in overall life, it would,
You could enjoy, maybe it'd be more free or something?
I guess that just depends on the country where you go, what kind of events that you do. I don't think I've never, like I said, I've never experienced it as like a bad, challenging or like bad experience. I've never had that being a woman working in events in anywhere in the world, really. So I can't really compare and say this is what it would be like.
And let's say you're talking to someone who is a young event professional and they are now sent to Middle East to organize an event, or they are assigned to organize an event. What kind of recommendations or tips you would give? Let's say you're sitting now drinking coffee with that person and you have like few minutes. What would you just tell, something key which person has to keep in mind going to Middle East and organizing an event?
I would just say be patient. Try and, be kind to people and be nice to your teammates and suppliers. And this will help you build those relationships. And then that will be the thing that will make it the easiest because you don't know everything and they can help you a lot on the day and, with the preparation. So try and, for event managers as well, I think it's really important. It's hard, but important to kind of rely on other people. You don't really give, jobs to other people. Like it's quite difficult. A lot of times you just feel like, oh, I can do this all by myself. And it's important to share that workload, especially on the few last days before the conference. So I would just say that, and then be respectful of try to understand the way that they're working. I think it's also, I would always try and get them to agree to if I have any important notes, I would always send them kind of the final details and then call them up and go through every detail over the phone to make sure, they do have the number of microphones that I need. They have the comfort monitors, and the setup will start at this time and they have to be out by this time, and just stay kind of on top of it. And we've had super late setups from maybe 12 o'clock at night, and we had to be ready at 7 a.m. And if you're not there, a lot of times the work would just stop. So they're building a stage set, and it's quite a big 15 meters by 3 meters stage set, and they have to build it before 7 a.m. and have everything ready. You still have to do sound check and all of that. And while you're in the room, everyone's fine, everyone's building. You leave for a few hours, you come back, everyone's just chilling there. So you have to kind of stay on top of it. Hopefully that does not happen to many people and they don't have to do overnight setups. It's not fun. But yeah, just be nice and make friends, have good relationships, and then stay on top of it, and just make sure you go through all the things that are important to you so they know how important that is as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good luck in your business.
Thank you.
And bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this conversation about organizing events in countries like Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and other Arabic cultures. And don't forget to subscribe below to the YouTube channel of Klex Events. Click the notification bell as well, because here we talk about events, virtual events, in-person conferences. And if you have some ideas what you want me to cover, also write down everything in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.